I came home early one Tuesday and finally understood who I was actually living with. Jordan had been looking for work for 8 months when I moved him into my apartment. That was the story he told me and the one I believed because I had no reason not to. He had just left a job in logistics that he described as toxic and mismanaged. Before that, a position in sales that hadn't worked out due to restructuring. He was talented, he said, just unlucky with timing. He needed a stable base to job hunt properly, and I had the space and I loved him, and those two things were enough for me to say yes. That was 2 years ago. In 2 years, Jordan had held 3 jobs. The first lasted 6 weeks before he said the environment was hostile. The second lasted 2 months before he said the manager had it out for him. The third lasted 3 weeks before he stopped mentioning it, and I realized one morning that he hadn't left the apartment in 9 days. I noticed but said nothing because saying something meant a conversation I wasn't ready for. I covered rent, I covered groceries, I covered the streaming subscriptions and the takeout he ordered on Tuesday afternoons. His parents deposited money into his account every month, a quiet arrangement I only found out about 6 months in, which covered his PlayStation purchases and shoes he didn't need. He was not struggling. He was comfortable. There is a significant difference, and I had spent 2 years confusing one for the other because it was easier than admitting what I was looking at. I told myself the right opportunity hadn't come along yet. I told myself the market was genuinely difficult. I built an architecture of excuses on his behalf and maintained it, while I left for work every morning and came home every evening to a man who had barely moved. I left work early on a Tuesday in March because I had a migraine and couldn't look at my screen. I texted Jordan I was on my way. He didn't reply. I unlocked the door at 2:14 in the afternoon. The curtains were drawn. The living room was dark, except for the television running Netflix at full volume. Jordan was on the couch in the exact position I had left him at 7 that morning. Same blanket, same posture, controller beside him, empty plate, and 2 glasses on the coffee table. He looked up when I came in, said hey, and looked back at the screen. I stood in the doorway and felt something shift in me that didn't shift back. I asked what he had done that day. He said not much. It had been a slow one. I asked if he had applied for any jobs. He said he had looked at a few listings, but nothing felt right. I asked what that meant. He said the market was tough and he didn't want to take something that wasn't a good fit. I put my bag down and told him to turn the television off. He muted it. I told him again. He turned it off. I sat across from him and told him the truth I should have told a year earlier, that I had been watching him not try for 2 years and had spent most of that time inventing explanations because the real one was too disappointing to sit with. The jobs hadn't been unlucky. The managers hadn't been unreasonable. He had left or lost every position because staying required effort, and effort was the one thing I had never once seen him sustain. He started to say something about the market. I told him to let me finish. I told him I had paid for his life for 2 years while he waited for something that was never going to happen on its own. That I had confused loving someone with funding their avoidance. That every time I covered a bill or accepted another explanation, I had made it easier for him to stay exactly where he was. That I had been so patient for so long that I had forgotten to ask what it was costing me. He said I was being unfair. That I didn't understand how hard the search was. I asked what he had applied for that week. Quiet. The week before. Still quiet. I told him I wanted him out by the end of the month. He looked genuinely surprised in a way that told me he had never considered this possible. That somewhere in 2 years of my patience, he had mistaken it for permanence. He asked if I was serious. I told him I had never been more serious about anything. He moved out 17 days later. His parents came with a van and I watched from the window the way you watch something end that should have ended much earlier. He texted twice afterward, once to say he missed me, once to ask if I had his charger. I replied to neither.